it's just enough to be wild for the evening. We fall apart to start believing. I know this feeling drips down my body, and the sadness is the real thing. And I
Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday to you guys. Just checking in with you. We do this every day. If you've never tuned in before, I am Pastor James. I'm from the Lake Stevens campus, and we try to bring you some sort of encouragement every single day that is based off of the YouVersion Bible app. 1 year in a year, 1 year reading Bible, 1 year Bible reading. Man, I don't know why I couldn't say that for some reason. That is what we try to do every single day for you guys. And today is what I would consider a warning kind of message, or a warning kind of chapters as we read through, at least through Ezekiel and Hebrews. In Psalms, it's a little more God, you provide, and all these other things. But for now, we're gonna look at Ezekiel. And we're in chapter 31, and I'm not going to read too much of this because it basically is going to be this repeating kind of pattern. But in verse 10 of chapter 31, it says this. It says, "Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because Egypt became proud and arrogant, and because it set itself so high above the others with its top reaching to the clouds, I will hand it over to the mighty nation that will destroy it as its wickedness deserves. I have already discarded it." And this is basically the warning that God is giving Egypt at this point. Egypt is proud too, and eventually they are going to be conquered as well. They were the big nation, they were the big dogs, and they started getting too proud, too arrogant, calling themselves God, calling the Pharaoh God, a God, in a line of gods. And so it made sense that eventually they overreached. Not that they weren't before, but it got to a point and God just says, you know what? I'm telling you right now, this is not how things work. And he's warning them. And he's warning them through Ezekiel, which is interesting because he's not warning them through another Egyptian. He's warning them through a Jew. And so it's just, it's interesting to me because I'm thinking, if I was an Egyptian pharaoh, why would I even listen to this guy? Yeah, I heard the stories about how my ancestors were taken down by this river or the sea that opened up and all these plagues, and I hear these rumors, but could it be fabricated? Could it be embellished? I don't know. And I get skeptical when I think about that kind of stuff. And I imagine they're in the same situation. So I feel for these guys. And he goes on into warning the Pharaoh specifically, you, Pharaoh, will be cast down into the pit with everyone else. And I wish I could tell you that they listened and they were like, wow, okay, so what should we do? God of Jacob, God of Abraham, God of Moses, what should we do now to not have this happen to us? They don't take that approach at all. In fact, it's the opposite. They're even more militant. And I think, man, as tough it is to read this knowing what's going to happen, I think about my own self where God gives me warnings all the time and I ignore them. Whether it's out of pride or ignorance, I ignore them. And then something happens and I shake my fist at God. God, why did this happen to me? Why did you allow this to happen to me? And it's not until there's some personal reflection and some personal time that I come to the conclusion that, or with hindsight, everything's better in hindsight. I come to the conclusion that had I listened and paid attention when these warning signs were coming, I might not be in this situation now. And that's a hard place to be. And I like how in Hebrews, it's just kind of stamps that and reiterates that very thought. We are in chapter 12 today, and we start off at verse 14, and it talks about work at living for God, of listening to God. And in verse 14 it says, work at living in peace with everyone, work at living a holy life. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. Bitterness is singled out right here. I mean, he goes on to talk about immorality and trading your birthright for a meal, and the fear. He talks about fear, and he talks about trembling, and he talks about anxiety, and he talks about vengeance and all these other things. But I like how he started with bitterness, because let's be real here. When something happens to us, whether we did it to ourselves or someone did it to us, the first thing that we usually experience is anger. Sometimes then there's shame, but a lot of times the next thing that we experience is bitterness. Why me? How could this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? What did my wife do to deserve this? My husband do to deserve this? And we start planting those seeds of bitterness. And God is warning us here directly when he's saying, listen, you want to be peaceful. You cannot work at peace with others if there's bitterness inside of you. You cannot live a holy life if there's bitterness inside of you. You cannot receive grace and mercy if there's bitterness inside of you. And he's giving us this warning because you and I, this is a very dangerous trap. It grows quickly, it entangles, and it sucks joy right out of your life. And if you've experienced bitterness and come out of it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for those of you that may be experiencing right now, you got to find ways to pull those weeds. And that's through prayer, that's through reconciliation, that's through apologizing, and maybe even through counseling. It's going to require a lot of work, but you can pull them out. You know, every time I have to rip out blackberry bushes, I'm so angry because they're not easy. If you've never ripped out a blackberry bush, they are the worst. They're thick at the base and they're deep and the thorns are so big. And I mean, you have to have like metal gloves, which don't even exist, you know, and it is such a hassle. And when it's just a couple vines, it's so much easier. You snip it down, you get it down to about here, and then you dig it out and you pull it right out and it takes like 10 minutes. But you know when it's difficult? Is when it's like 10 feet long, taking up your entire backyard. Then you look at it and you're like, oh, that is so many blackberry bushes. I do not even want to tackle this. It's too big, it's too much. And then what ends up happening, it grows bigger. And you're not paying attention and you walk by it, it scrapes you and it scratches you and it hurts you. And then you want to kick it, but then you know if you kick it, then you're going to scratch your foot. And it becomes this worse and worse thing. What if that's what it's like for bitterness inside of us? Where it becomes this small thing that we can, in fact, pull it out from the roots and be done with it. But if we ignore it, if we feed it, if we allow it to grow, it gets bigger and bigger, and then it just starts ensnaring everything and causing more and more havoc. I believe that's exactly what God is trying to warn us against. And he says right here in verse 25, be careful you do not refuse to listen to the one who is speaking, that is God. For if the people of Israel did not escape when they refused to listen to Moses, the earthly messenger, will we certainly not escape if we reject the one who speaks to us from heaven. I think God is talking to us. I think Jesus is talking to us. There might be some bitterness inside of you that just needs to be removed. Maybe it's a huge backyard bush. But you know what? Even those can be removed. You know how? You start with a piece at a time. And maybe you endless help, but it can be done. So my encouragement to you today is remove the bitterness inside of you. Start the process of healing now. Don't let it entangle your entire life, and remove the joy that God brings. I want you guys to have a great day today. Spend some time praying right now, asking God to help you remove the bitterness. I'll see you guys next week.